Well, our next guest here on TSB has been producing, or at least helping companies and individuals produce world-class content for a number of years. He's got a great idea of the 4 Ps. We're going to get into that very, very soon, but it's our pleasure to join in the studio Raj Kotecha from the Creative Content Agency. Thank you very much for joining us here on TSB.
It's great to be here.
It's great to have you in here. You've been running this business since, 2006, Creative Content Agency?
2006, yeah, we started it. I started it as a podcasting company, so I was a little bit too early.
That's quite early
on that one. So you can imagine what those pictures were like when I was going into companies telling them about building their brand through podcasting and social media. Got laughed out of quite a few offices, but stuck with it. And then the iPhone was released, and then the Social Network movie came out, and it became very mainstream to produce content. And then the 2008 recession hit, and brands that were spending lots of money or wasting a lot of money decided, hang on a second, we need a more efficient way to communicate. And all those factors combined spiked and led to an increase in content. And we were already there because my cousin Vic and I, who most people know, we were already going back and forth to New York and LA interviewing rappers. And we were like, hey, if we take me out and put a business person in, and we take the rapper out and we put a Minister of Tourism for Egypt in, that content's much more valuable to the business community.
Because I was trying to talk to Neil here. What do we talk to Raj about? Is it about his business? Is it his podcasting? Is it my friends, your friends? You really do symbolise what it's like being an entrepreneur in Dubai, where if there's an opportunity and you've got the right mindset and you've got a bit of go about you, you can find a solution for clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I was looking at Neil and I was like, this is another handsome guy with a ponytail and a beard. I was like, actually, I could double my output by just having Neil show up in certain meetings. And if you squint, we're basically the same guy. So I think that could be a big opportunity. No, but absolutely, that comes from, being a shopkeeper's son, 42 years old. So in the 80s and 90s, it was always constantly about serving, different customers, building rapport, having that kind
and
of
evolving quickly, being agile.
Very much so, yeah. I mean, the first content I ever thought about making was like posters for the shop window in my dad's shop. And then, when I went into university, I started promoting nights and becoming a DJ. So everything I'm learning at university about, marketing and USPs and business is going immediately into my flyers. But the big shift is, of course, like when online video started to happen, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and that's what's caused a lot of a spike. And what I love about it more than anything is the fact that it doesn't matter whether you're trying to push your personal agenda or whether you're trying to push your business agenda, there's just a massive opportunity.
No, you see, I love the way, you're approaching content. You've been early in the race. That's why you had the advantage. People now already know that, all right, so, you guys are there doing it for them. But how much of, or as they say that, how much is too much? Where does the clutter begin? Because I want to be on Instagram, I want to be on TikTok, I want to be on LinkedIn, I want to be on Facebook, I want a podcast, YouTube, literally everywhere. But there has to be a time where I say, listen, no, this is where I limit myself, or do I go, no, I don't want to limit myself?
The interesting thing there is, firstly, I'd want to clarify is how much is too much for you or for the audience?
Let's see, it could be both ways.
Well, let's answer both. What's too much for the audience? People think that no matter how much effort they put into their content, whether it's a little bit or a lot, it's going to be judged and people will be like, okay, this is too much content. But what's happening is, the reality is, if you walk outside and you walk down the street or you walk into a cafe or a cinema, or even sometimes when you're driving, people are on their phones just flicking their thumbs from the bottom to the top. So as much as you think it might be too much, the audience decides what is too much. And the thumb is a very interesting thing, because for those of you who have ever seen, listening out there, Gladiator, the gladiator has a fight in the Colosseum, and then there's thumbs up means live and a thumbs down means die. Well, I'm just putting my thumb up now behind the microphone. What's this on social media? It's a like.
It's a like.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the audience decides. Now, how much is too much for you? I can promise you, when it comes to thinking about putting out too much content, you will surprise yourself that if you put out a ton of content and you start making a lot of money or attracting a lot of opportunities, you'll weirdly find space in your life to make more content.
I'll tell you something. I was talking to this friend of mine, and I was preparing my the year roundup reel, as they say, so that it could go out right on the 1st of Jan and look back at what we've done. I scrolled on my Instagram feed and I realized in the entire year I hadn't done too much on Instagram. On the gram, I hadn't done too much. In my personal life, I mean, work-wise, I had done 17 tournaments across the world, traveled a bit, went
cricket commentary,
cricket commentary perspective, okay? Covered the World Cup, went to do a lot of... a lot of things that never transcended into the social media world. People don't know that I've done that, right? So now this year I'm like, no, whatever I do, I'm putting it on the gram. And that's why that question was slightly from that perspective that, do I go for the overkill when I put up content, or people will be like, wow, he's doing a lot, nice.
No, I back Raj on this, because I say this to myself all the time. Do I post this? But I think there's so much content, there's so much out there. Just publish it. Just get it out there.
Yeah, and the thing about overkill, it's like when people say, look, I don't want to lift too much weight, so I'll get too muscly. But you are very aware of how much muscle you're growing months, if not years in advance of hitting that. You don't just wake up overnight.
True.
And like you're like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the 90s, right? Like you realize on the way there that, hang on, this is an appropriate amount. And if you want to plateau out, you can do. But here's the thing. There are more and more people coming online. There are bigger and bigger audiences. So you just made a point there about cricket. Like this year, there was a lot of hype about the World Cup. Every year in the US, there's a lot of hype around the Super Bowl. These platforms and these kinds of sports are vastly overshadowed by the number of people that watch cricket. Now, what's really ironic here is that you are already a talent. The microphone that you're speaking into right now to speak to the whole of Dubai and the UAE is the same microphone that you could build the biggest cricket podcast up on. Plus, you know what you're talking about. Plus, you're in situation and you're going to these places. The situation you found yourself in is that you're like the cobbler who's got bad shoes. And we've all been there. All of us content creators that create content on a regular basis, which means that we create content for others. We make their shoes brilliant. We look down at our own feet and they're barefoot.
Yeah.
And so this is something that you need to really grapple with and say, okay, look, I'm going to do this. Now, here's why it's important to do it in 2023. Because with the emergence of ChatGPT and AI and content becoming easier and easier to make, I mean, we're here in the studio right now. We're shooting with iPhones. Okay, the price of producing content's coming down and down and down. And what I don't want for either of you or anybody listening is it for it to be like 2045, the year 2045, and we look back at this kind of like white hot opportunity of like from 1995 to 2035, where content was effectively almost free to make and definitely free to publish, that we didn't take advantage of it. So you've got to take advantage of it. It's your responsibility to yourself and to your profession.
It's a great view, and that's one of the things that you do with the Creative Content Agency, the website creativecontent-agency.com. I've done one of your courses. Talk to me about this idea, because I love it. The 4 Ps that you teach people.
Yeah, so the 4 Ps is incredible. We've all been there. Any entrepreneur or anybody who's had to kind of like write up what they've done, is that there was a period of time, and it must have been over 10 years ago now, where I was updating my website and I was looking at writing up all of my clients. And as I wrote up each of my clients and put all the case studies up there, I was like, hang on a second, for this client I did this, for this client I did this, and for this client I did this. And I was like, I basically did the same thing for all the clients. I was like, well, what are the themes? Well, firstly, I planned their content, then we produced it, and then we published it online for them, and then we promoted it. I was like, hang on a second, they're all Ps. So plan, produce, publish, promote. Now, whether you look at the scratchings on the inside of the pyramids of Egypt, or you look at the metaverse, this logical path is how all successful content is produced. You have to plan it before you can produce it. It has to be produced before you can publish it online.
Right.
And it has to be published online before you can promote it and drag real people to look at it, you know, to attract them with their phones or wherever they consume their content. So what we've come up with here is a universal strategy, a universal framework that if you follow these things and you consider these points, that you will be able to produce great content. Now, the strategy is universal, but your content journey, that itself is a personal journey, and where you start and what your strengths are, that's ultimately down to you. And to your point there, Neil, this is where kind of we found ourselves stepping in today and evolving our offering, is that we step in and meet you where you are. So we start off by giving you an assessment and saying, okay, what are your strengths and weaknesses as a content consumer and as a content creator? We figure out, of the 4 Ps, where do you really excel and where are your weak points? And then we coach you from there upwards on the 4 Ps of content. And we're so proud of it because we've had it for so long. It's worked whether we've worked, you know, we've done projects like My Friends, Your Friends, which you've supported, I really appreciate. But even right through to projects that we've done with Gary Vee, Tony Robbins, Stephen Bartlett, Robin Sharma, these, whether it's big A-list scale celebrities or whether it's individual kind of freelancers and entrepreneurs, it's worked for all of them.
This is amazing, you know, I mean, to understand it in an individual level, because normally if you see, you know, people who are trying to help content creators, most of these agencies, and I've spoken to a few of them, you know, trying to understand how it all works in their business model or in their psyche, is like, all right, yeah, don't worry, we'll take care of your content, we'll publish it. No, you cannot publish my content, because my content is my content. It's the same two things, right? But how I think of it, how I perceive, what is my tonality, I would rather have someone come to me, speak to me, tell me what has to be done, and I'll do it, instead of just taking it off my shoulder and publish, like you said, that there are a bunch of apps available today to to bulk publish content for the whole year and or to publish it. It may not work for me, but it could work for some businesses which are in that generic concept.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about auto-publishing is a risky one because we live in a world today where anything can happen and something can hit the news cycle. A person of importance could pass away, and all of a sudden you're promoting like a brunch meetup, and that might not be appropriate if not only if that brunch is cancelled because it's that's just the way that the city's gone, but you want to make sure that you're matching the tone of your audience and your target customer. So that's one thing, but I think another thing about this whole journey is that ultimately, once you've done one loop, once you've recognized from an idea, putting it out, and then having that kind of like positive reinforcement, it kind of auto spurs you to do more and more and more. And to your point about, when agencies say we'll do it, I don't worry at all about who's going to hire us next. Okay. And I'm talking about from A-list celebrities right through to somebody building a business in Jumeirah. I go into pitches not to get hired. I go into pitches to get fired. We present the day that they're going to fire us rather than the day they're going to hire us, because we're not in the business of like locking ourselves into your company or into your brand forever. We're like, look, this is how much training you need. And at this point, whether it be 6 months if you're super talented, or 9 months or 3 months if you're like exceptional, when do you want to fire us? Because once we've shown you the 4 Ps, you should really be looking at hiring your own team or taking it on yourself or doubling down on what works and pulling away from what doesn't, so that we can kind of get out the picture and go and service somebody else.
And I can back Raj up on that, because I jokingly said to him once, you should be my manager. And he goes, nah, you just need an assistant.
Yeah.
And I actually thought, no, he's pretty switched on here. He knows exactly why. Because I guess in your training with the 4 Ps of so many people, the mind is the biggest issue. Now, we had someone who you've worked very, very closely. We had Spencer Lodge came in. He's got a great podcast about sales training, but a lot of that is those same values of why is it that some people get up at 5:30 in the morning to go running, and why do some still stay in bed and hit the snooze button? Because it seems so hard with a lot of people. You might have the best of idea, but why is there this blockage between having the ideas and having the content, but not just able to hit go to launch their content online?
I think it's the perception of what happens next, right? What happens if I start? Now, some people fear success and they worry about what it's going to be like if they are successful and who they might become, because if you become successful or you become popular, it's like when you become rich. It's like a magnifying glass on you. It will highlight everything that makes you great, but it will also accentuate your flaws. But the reason why people get paralyzed through decision making or procrastination is because, number one, they're not in tune with why it is that they're doing it in the first place, and two, it's a false perception of who it is that's going to be judging them on the other side of the screen. And when we think about how we are on the other side of the screen, do you know how many hours, hundreds of hours of effort that you scroll by when you're just flicking through Instagram or TikTok or anything like that? Right. Like every single person that posted put in at least 5 minutes to maybe in some cases 5 months to make that video happen. True. And we just scroll past it. In fact, sometimes when we're in a scrolling motion and we look away and we pick up a biscuit to put into our tea, we don't even see that moment, right? Yeah. So people fear the judgment of, hang on a second, every single thing I'm going to do is going to be interrogated down to the last pixel. And here's one thing that the last 2 years taught us. We were all watching TV, we were watching Sky and other these big platforms. And those folks on those TV channels were bringing in experts to speak about a range of subjects, and those experts were coming in via Zoom. So we were watching people on TV in Zoom quality because people couldn't see each other one-to-one. Right. So quality doesn't matter. Relevance matters. And once you've closed that relevance loop where I put something out which I thought would be of value to this audience, it was of value, it brought something back for me, that thing then reinforced me to make more content, it then becomes a positive cycle. And the brain, the neuroplasticity of your brain starts to see opportunities for content every single day when you walk around.
Yeah, suddenly it's you're thinking about buying a red car, you see more red cars.
You got it. So when you see content strategy through the lens of the 4 Ps, everything all of a sudden just starts to kind of demystify and become a lot easier, and content just becomes just as easy as making your dinner every day.
Or you could just have lots of cats.
That would work.
No, which is true. I mean, see, Kitch and I have been doing radio for such a long time. We don't really need to bring out our books and pens and papers and write down scripts and ideas and concepts. The conversation goes on and we pick up topics and we start talking. This is content creation. But the same thing, if it has to be put on, say, Instagram or TikTok, we would be like, yeah, no, maybe. So what is the right thing as far as content is concerned? Like you said, that there has to be a value that you add to content for the one who's watching. How do I justify, or how do I judge what is right, what is wrong? Or do I just put it in and do a dipstick measurement?
Yeah, you're dating your audience in the initial stages. You're putting out content, and you don't realize whether people like you because you're handsome, funny, you're giving across high levels of high quality information that nobody else has, you're being really educational, you're being really entertaining. But you need to try a bunch of different things. So we look at the initial stages of your content journey in the 4 Ps, roughly in 3 stages. There's the piloting phase, which is where you're trying to get content audience fit. So if you look at something like the first episode of The Simpsons or the first episodes of Rachel
horrible.
and Ross.
Yeah.
They're horrible. The production quality is not great. That's normal. But also the big narratives, like the intense Ross and Rachel relationship in Friends, that doesn't emerge until the seasons that follow. So you've got to let your trends emerge, and that's a back and forth dance with your audience.
Because The Simpsons was about Bart, and then eventually it became about Homer.
You got it. So you might start your content about cricket, but eventually it could become about mental health for men or gut health or cars, because you've got to have this dance with your audience. And it is like dating, right? Like you go in there at first, you kind of like, you're really glossed up, episode 1, episode 3, episode 15, you're laying it down in a very nice formatted way, and then over a period of time, your content, your podcast, whatever it may be, is just more of you hanging out in your boxer shorts on your couch watching Netflix, which is episode 80. Now the dating analogy works both ways. One of the biggest advantages I've had in this business.
When is the dating podcast starting, right?
I won't speak on any of those subjects, but like the dating analogy works both ways. So if there's ever been an advantage for me or any of my clients, like Spencer, who's been one of our biggest successes, is that if you put out content, if you do then go and pursue an opportunity, when you walk into that room for that initial meeting, you're starting that opportunity meeting on the 3rd or 4th date. Because typically what happens, think about when you go for an opportunity, you go for an interview or you go to do a deal. So who are you, what you do, what your strengths, what your weaknesses, features and benefits. But if that's already been communicated through your content, by the time you walk in, people know who you are. They've covered all the small talk, the ground 1, ground 2, like level 1, level 2 stuff. You can get into a much more advanced conversation, which for business people, in real terms, that lowers their like sales cycle, that lowers their deal cycle. And it all comes down to prejudice, which we think is a bad word, but it means to be prejudged. So when I came down here today, we didn't figure out what we were going to talk about live on air. You know what my strength is. And so it's the same with you.
Yeah, well, because we found out with our show when we first started it 9-10 months ago, we thought we'd be talking a lot about cricket, business. We really just talk about trying to get producer Prem to have a girlfriend.
Nice. Well, there's a couple of ways to solve that.
Yeah, we can. Look, if you want more details, we could talk to you all day, because I just find your stuff so inspirational. It's such an amazing story. It's the creativecontentagency.com. Of course, those new community courses that are going to be available online to ask yourself, where are you in your content journey? And I actually bet if you sit at the end of the bed late at night and turn the lights, you'll probably be able to answer that question yourself somehow.
Yeah, and then give us a shout and we'll meet you where you are, not in bed, but we'll meet you where you are in your content journey, and we'll take you from there. And you'll be surprised. Again, it's like the gym. It's like having a PT. You do it a few times, soon it becomes like a lifestyle change, because content is like a lifestyle. And then the benefits start to come in. So I'd encourage everyone to take action.
Great advice. Raj from the Creative Content Agency, thank you very much for coming.